Hello and welcome to the Connectology podcast. Here, Road Night Taylor's influential team of elite connection specialists and their expert guests help you to better understand distribution and transmission network connections and how to acquire them faster, for less cost and at lower risk.
Hello everyone and welcome to a very special edition of Road Night Taylor's Connectology podcast, where we are very pleased to be joined by Laura Henry from the ESO. So Laura, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me on the podcast today. I'm very honoured to be here.
You are actually our first guest from the ESO, so you are definitely very, very honoured, and we're very glad you made the time for it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And Laura, so your sort of official job title is Head of Connection Change and Policy.
So it's the Policy and Change Manager in the ESO Connections team.
There we go. Okay, sorry. I knew change and policy were in it, which is I guess, given the events going on at the moment, is quite a job.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of changes and a lot of policies needed with all the changes that are going on at the minute. So yeah.
And you've obviously we see you lots on sort of webinars and at the connection seminars. And you, your team primarily is sort of focused on some of the tactical changes, some of the kind of like shorter term duration initiatives that you kind of rolled out over the last 18 months. Is that right?
Yeah. So my team is responsible for most of the tactical changes across connections that affect transmission. So my colleague Will Cook Wilson's team lead on the distribution side of the tactical changes. And then my team are also responsible for leading on code changes that impact connections from a connections subject matter expert point of view. And also my team write and develop policies that may impact connections, but where a code change isn't necessarily needed.
So things like LOAs, code change, that was your one.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And kind of future things that might come out, guidance on like technology changes, which we can discuss in a bit. And that's also your team.
Yes. Yeah. So lots of policies on different areas to try and help customers interpret the codes better.
which are always gratefully received. I think all of us could say in this kind of connection space at the moment, guidance is good, right?
Yes, yeah, no, definitely. There's a lot going on, and we want to make it as clear as possible to our customers what it means to them, why the change is needed, and just guide them through the processes.
Yeah, obviously. And so, of those kind of looking back at it's about 18 months that we've been running the kind of tactical initiatives, or since you kind of announced the first of them, and I'm conscious that you've probably presented that snake chart showing, all of the probably 50 plus things that you're doing. Which of those initiatives have you got sort of, have you got a favourite of something that you've implemented over the last 18 months?
So there has been a lot of initiatives. We started with the ESO's 5-point plan, which was launched back in February 23. It then morphed into the Connections Action Plan actions that Des and Ofgem set, which were a fast-paced set of actions, which all had, most of them had a Q1 24 date to complete, which I'm pleased to say the ESO met all of our targets for that. So yeah, there's been a large number of changes. In terms of the one, I guess the one that's kind of closest to my heart is probably queue management. I helped to write that mod in the version that it is now, working very closely with a number of partners and also with like the work group for the queue management code mod. So yeah, that one is probably the one that's closest to my heart, given that we're still going through the implementation of it as well now.
So you breathe a sigh of relief when Ofgem approved.
Yeah, definitely, especially when they approved Wacom 7 with the Metro. Yeah, it was a great result from that code mod.
And are you tracking? So I suppose we've discussed it on this podcast before, but in some ways it sets up a really good future for connections sort of regime and future queue management. But it might take a while for some of those milestones to kick in for customers, who've got relatively late connection dates. Are you kind of tracking that as it goes forwards to see how it impacts the queue?
Yeah, so we're still in the implementation phase of the queue management code mod. So we're still waiting to see which option customers choose.
Because they could still mod up at the moment.
Yeah. So we've still got a couple of weeks left on the notice period. So it'll be interesting to see which way customers go with that decision. Then once we know which decision they've made, then we're going to be working through implementing it across into all of the connection agreements. But also that's the point when things will start to hit. So we have had a few milestones that have been due. We haven't terminated anybody yet. I know that that's always the question that everybody asks, although I do always try to steer people in the direction that if we haven't terminated people, that's still a massive success, because it means all those projects are progressing and they're achieving the milestones that they've been set. So it's going to take a little bit of time until the queue management milestones bite, because we're still getting them into all the agreements. But I think once it is into all of the agreements, it will make a massive change to the connections queue.
So have you had to kind of review exemptions and so on for those kind of few projects that might have already hit milestones or missed them?
No, not yet. At the minute, there's only been a few because of it still being in the notice period, and also because anybody that's had them in their agreement, they need to have signed for them to come into effect. There's only been a few contracts that have signed at the minute. So at the minute, I'm happy to say that everybody has met their milestones. We haven't had to review any exceptions, and there hasn't been any issues with any of the milestones.
And have you got a time, just sort of sticking on this point, have you got a time frame for those people who haven't submitted a mod app and haven't done so by the 27th of May? That's the deadline. For those customers who haven't done that, they'll get an agreement to vary with the milestones in it. And if you kind of got, you'll presumably start processing those beginning of June. That's going to take a while, I imagine.
Yeah, so the code mod legal text actually says that we have 2 years to implement this. So the thinking behind that was because we need to essentially pull out everybody that's requested to mod app. We need to pull them away from the list of agreements that got noticed, and then look at everybody that needs an agreement to vary, and then start working through them on connection date first. So we're going to work in order of connection date.
So those closest connection dates will get their agreements to vary.
Yes, yeah, because we're conscious that because the milestones start hitting 4 years and 9 months out from connection. If you go to the latest part of the milestone table, It shows duration from connection date and when those milestones start to hit. So we're conscious that we need to be focusing on people that are due to connect in the next 5 to 6 years first, and then start looking at everybody else after that.
That makes a lot more sense. Okay, so queue management and getting those milestones in, or getting the concept approved and the work still in progress. I mean, that does feel like quite a significant step. And I suppose that's something we're going to see more and more kind of dynamic queue management as we move into the kind of longer term connections reform with sort of capital C, capital R. Just going back to the technical, sort of tactical initiatives, have any of them been more challenging to implement?
So I think they've all been challenging in their own ways. I mean, the nature of trying to change the connections process at pace and trying to, our overall goal with all of these tactical initiatives is to try and improve the connection dates for our customers, and also improve a process that was written a long time ago before, when the industry was a very different place to what it is now.
And didn't have 700 gigawatts of queue.
Yes. Yeah. So we, they all have challenges in their own way. But I think if you look at, so I guess if I just work through some of the tactical initiatives that we've had, maybe start with kind of the more easier ones. Not that any of them have been particularly easy, but if I start with kind of the easiest and work to the more difficult. So TEC Amnesty, so that gave us 4.1 gigs of capacity freed from the queue. It closed last year. It was the first one of the 5-point plan initiatives to close and to complete. Like I say, it's all of them have their own challenges. We always need to do a lot of stakeholder engagement. We always need to make sure that customers understand what these tactical initiatives are trying to achieve. But that one was relatively straightforward.
I guess there was a precedent for it. We had a TEC Amnesty, in the past, and so there was kind of a bit of a...
Yeah. Back in 2013,
yeah,
the last
again.
So it was. The termination process itself is quite a long and complicated process anyway. So we have. I'm pleased to say that we have worked through all of those TEC Amnesty agreements and have terminated them or reduced TEC where that was requested. So that one was probably the slightly easier of all of them, and also gave us 4.1 gig, which I know compared to the size of the queue isn't a lot, but it's still a good place to start with the tactical initiative.
Still a few projects that can get accelerated, isn't it? Putting it in context.
Yeah, and then if I move to more kind of medium in terms of difficult to implement, so I'd say the code mod. So you've got the queue management CMP 376, and then the letter of authority, which was CMP 427. They are, so I personally find when a code mod is involved, it does help to structure the process a lot more, and does make things slightly easier to implement than some of the other projects, which I'll go on to in a minute, which haven't got that structure of the code governance process, because naturally you have the work groups, you have the input from the work group, and you have actions that you have to meet.
You get into a timetable, don't you, really, I suppose? You put forward and Ofgem, provide feedback on a timetable, and then you get a date, for them to approve. So that sort of helps frame it in terms of implementation time, because some of the problem, I think, is probably across the industry that there's just a question of, this is a great idea, but how long is it going to take to implement?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, one of the key challenges, I guess, with the code mod process is we don't know which option Ofgem will pick, and we have to be ready for all of them. And often they have quite quick implementation dates. So it's quite tricky to make sure internally we are ready for all of these different alternatives. But, we put a lot of work in kind of behind the scenes, getting ready for all of these different options that could happen. So, we do a lot of training. We change all of our processes. So for like queue management, we needed a new appendix. We update our operating procedures. And then there's all the stakeholder engagement that comes along with this as well. So yeah, I'd say they are the kind of more medium in terms of the difficulty of implementing them. And then the trickiest ones, I would say, probably are the ones that have a high level of technical and commercial input. So things like the non-firm energy storage, technical limits, and the transmission works review. Because of the nature of these projects, because they have a lot of technical input, and we want to make sure we're getting the best results for our customers, we are doing the best we can to improve the connections process, they naturally take slightly longer. And that's why sometimes there's some delays with some of these projects, because we want to make sure we're doing it right. And yeah, so those ones are probably the ones that are slightly trickier to implement. But as a whole, I'd say they've all got their own challenges and benefits. But cumulatively, they are all helping to improve the connections process, which is great.
And we were chatting just before we came in about the transmission works review. And obviously, I think it's something which there was probably quite a lot of expectation from in the industry. Yes, great, I can submit my expression of interest and I'll get an accelerated date. Have you got kind of, so far, the ESO have been sort of processing those requests in tranches. And I think we've only actually had one tranche released of offers for earlier dates, but have you kind of got an update on where that's got to? Because I feel like perhaps in the industry with connections reform and so much else going on, we've kind of forgotten about the transmission works review, but it's still going on, right?
Yeah. So there's still a lot of work going on between the ESO and all three TOs on these projects. So in terms of non-firm accelerated connections for energy storage, so phase 1 achieved 10 gigawatts of accelerated connections, which is absolutely brilliant. Phase 2 is in progress at the minute, and that again is looking to achieve another 10 gigawatts. So that's absolutely brilliant that both of those phases have brought that many projects forward. In terms of the transmission works review, so where it stands at the minute is we're still waiting for the studies to be completed by all three TOs. They are very close to the end of this, and I know we've previously publicised that we will hopefully be able to get back to customers in the summer this year. We're still very hopeful that it will provide accelerated dates for those that have expressed an interest, but until we see the results of those studies, we won't know to what extent. But that project has been brilliant in terms of improving the CPAs, changing the attrition rates, and also, like I say, we hope that it will bring accelerated dates.
So actually, that's probably quite an important point. So customers who did express interest last year, that EOI to say, I'd like to accelerate my battery storage, or I'd like to accelerate my kind of construction ready project, they can probably expect to maybe hear from you by the end of this summer, even if you're not kind of necessarily going to do the same batched approach where you do a few and then wait a few months and then do a few more, or you're going to kind of go out to everyone with the news.
Yeah. So we have been. So a couple of the TOs know projects that definitely can't be accelerated. So we have already been in touch with those customers and made them aware, because we didn't want to keep them waiting any longer.
Bad news first.
Yeah, good policy. Whereas the ones that we still don't know if they can be accelerated, we keep in touch with them to let them know that we're still looking at the project and we're still reviewing things, and we'll get in touch with them as soon as possible. But yeah, we hope by the summer we will be in a position where everybody will know. And then that part of what was the 5-point plan will then close down, ready for reform to start.
Ready for reform to start. Okay, well, that's we like good bits of positive news. So maybe hope is not yet dead if you haven't heard from your CCM that your project can't be accelerated. Okay, so I guess moving on from kind of the 5-point plan then to some of the other tactical initiatives that have been introduced sort of partly through the CAP actions, I was really interested in the proposal to bring in a bit more guidance around things like technology changes and the kind of concept of what's an allowable change versus what's maybe a kind of material change, which at distribution, that's been quite a defined concept for a very long time. If you change X, then you go to the back of the queue. You have to reapply. So if you applied for a solar farm and you now want this to be a battery, you need to reapply. Whereas at transmission, actually, it's been probably a much more opaque process for applicants if they submit a MODAP to understand, is that going to change their connection date? Is it going to change their connection costs? So am I right in thinking that you've got some guidance possibly in draft form at the moment?
Yes. So my team are currently working on 2 policies. So we've separated them out. One is technology change. One is what is an allowable MODAP. Now, there's a lot of crossover between the two, and they've not been fully signed off yet. So I won't be able to go into kind of the depths of them, but I can give a high-level overview of what they are. So the technology change paper essentially looks at if a project wants to change technology type from one thing to another. It might be their whole connection or it might be part of their connection and how that would be treated. The allowable changes one, or what defines a modification application, that is looking at giving customers more guidance on the process for a modification application and whether it should be put through as a MODAP or whether it needs to be a brand new application, and either they need to terminate their existing agreement and start again, or if they want to keep their existing agreement, they need to put a brand new application in for something else. One of the reasons why we've done this is because what we found is where a project needs to be terminated and start again because it's such a drastic change from what they were originally to what they're trying to be, we don't typically know that until quite far through the process. So if you think of the 3-month off process, is when the studying is really getting developed, is that when that's the point that you would know.
And you might be 2 months into your 90 days. Yeah.
And we don't really want to be turning around to customers and saying, oh, actually, you know how you submitted this modification application 2 months ago? Well, actually, you need to reapply and put it in as a brand new application and terminate your existing agreement. So we want to try and capture that ahead of the process starting. So that is the main purpose behind the policy, to try and give a bit more clarity.
So, and I suppose from a customer perspective, because often what they care about really is, I don't mind what the process is that I go through, but I want to understand what's at risk. By making this change, am I going to, lose my point of connection, or am I going to change my connection date? So I guess it's the kind of sort of the potentially 3 outcomes. It could be an allowable MODAP that's so simple because it's kind of administrative change. It doesn't require any restudy, in which case your kind of connection date is safe. The technical terms of your connection offer are going to remain the same. It could be a MODAP, a legitimate MODAP. Maybe you're like adding a little bit of additional technology or something, but the rest of the projects remain the same. But you'll need to the TO would need to restudy that, and then the date could change. Or it could be so fundamental. You were an offshore wind farm, and now you're a hydrogen pumped storage in a salt cavern in a different part of the country, and that's just a new application. So are those the kind of 3 paths, or is there any kind of other route?
Yeah, there is also, so I guess on those 3 parts, the technology change part of it kind of falls into that other policy where there is a specific policy on what happens if you change technology. But yeah, it is essentially that, showing the routes that you can take. There's also the more minimal changes that could be done via an administration fee.
So would that be things like innovation?
Yeah, or like if you're potentially changing some of your equipment, but it's like for like change. So the CUSC says at the minute that you should go through a modification application. However, it feels like a lot of work for a customer to go through a modification application when it's a minor change.
Yeah,
we're looking at
still a 300 megawatt solar farm, but you're changing your transformers to being, half the size, but having twice as many of them. That doesn't actually have any impact on grid, but it might change what's in your Appendix O.
Yeah. So things like that, we're looking to see if there's a way. And like I say, this isn't set in stone yet because we're still developing it. We were looking to see if there's a way that we could do it so that it's an admin fee, just to try and make it easier for our customers.
Yeah, well, and for everyone probably. Yeah,
well, yeah,
very, very pragmatic. Okay, so on the technology change, then, one question I think that we've had discussions with a number of customers, particularly around energy storage. Conscious that a lot of battery storage applications, for example, that went in, and now perhaps the landscape, the kind of commercial landscape for energy storage in general, is perhaps changing, and people are looking at, well, originally maybe I designed my connection as it's going to be a 1 hour or 2 hour battery. Maybe I'm looking at changing to a longer duration of storage. Is that something you've thought about in the technology change paper?
So typically the technology change paper is if a customer is moving from one thing to another, like you said, like they already are a wind farm and then they want to add some solar. In terms of kind of different types of batteries, it hasn't explored that. However, we could take that away to look at that as well.
I think it's an interesting question because it's harder as a starting point to say, well, there would need to be a process for changing, because actually I don't think at the moment you ask customers, so when we apply on behalf of a storage user, there isn't really a kind of a data field to say this is a 1 hour battery. We just care about the megawatts. We don't sort of care about the duration. So I suppose that one is slightly more complex because it would require going out to people, first of all, to say, by the way, what is your connection, so that we can record that, as a 1 hour battery. And then in future, if you want to change it, this is the policy we'd apply. So perhaps that's sort of the next step.
Yeah, but no, it's an interesting point, and yeah, definitely happy to take away and talk about it internally.
That sounds great. And now I'm mindful that you have said they are draft policies, so you might not have answers to all of these, but could you give us an example of something which would be deemed to be in your sort of material change policy or allowable MODAPs policy? Could you give us an example of something which would be not allowed as a MODAP, so something which would involve a brand new application, for example?
Yeah, sure. So I guess at its most extreme, if a project was going from generation to demand. So, it might be a very extreme example, but if it was a solar farm that all of a sudden decided it wanted to become a data center, then that would need to be a brand new application because it's completely different. It's studied differently. Yeah.
And I suppose even on a technical basis, it has like different connection parameters. You might suddenly need 2 bays rather than 1 or something, from a security of supply standards. That makes sense. And okay, if perhaps sort of like stepping back from the technology types, now we've successfully implemented the LOA change mod. So new customers applying now need to apply with an LOA. If they wanted to change their land parcel, would that be something which you're talking about in terms of allowable MODAPs? Is that so? So if there was no technology change, but actually they were moving their site from the LOA that they had submitted with their application, have you thought about how you might deal with that?
Yes, so LOA version 2 is, as we're calling it internally, is following on from LOA version 1, which was successfully approved by Ofgem on the 15th of March and went into implementation from the 28th of March. So just as a little side, moving on to LOA version 2, we've seen great results from that already. We have seen application rates reduce, and also we have seen applications be also rejected because they haven't provided the right LOA. So building on from that, LOA version 2 falls into the connections reform code mods, and we are looking at duplication checks and red line boundaries. What we are planning to do with the red line boundary side of the LOA is essentially mirroring what the DNOs do. So what we try to do where there's existing processes, we want alignment between transmission and distribution. We did a similar thing with queue management. So we looked at the ENA's best practice guide and used as much of that as possible into the transmission queue management process. So for this one, we will do a similar thing where we look at what the DNOs are doing and look to mirror that. Now, how that will pan out in the work groups, I don't know at the minute. They're just starting. We will be talking about this in detail at those work groups. So I don't know what kind of the end outcome will be of this, but yeah, we will look to do something similar to what's already out there.
Okay, yeah. So I guess from your perspective, you probably do want to kind of close down the routes for people to radically change project locations, but it's presumably a bit of a pragmatic balance between how many code mods it's humanly possible to raise this year and what should probably be, as you say, rolled into the kind of the connections reform piece, and I suppose it would form part of Gate 2, because if Gate 2 is around providing land rights, then those land rights have to be land rights associated with the red line boundary that presumably can't change.
Yeah. Like I say, there will be some elements that can change, because we know naturally that projects can't necessarily stay exactly the same throughout the life cycle. But yeah, we just don't know how it's going to pan out in work groups at the minute. But we are talking to industry about this. We're working with colleagues from DNOs to understand what they're doing as well, to make sure that we can try and get alignment there.
Okay, so anyone listening who's not sure if their land parcel has the rest of this year to get it honed down, it sounds like. And I guess in general, the purpose of those two guidance documents, and you said, it's about kind of providing clarity for customers. Are you hoping that actually it will disincentivize people, I don't want to use the word sort of like fiddling around, but mod-apping projects extensively. So really kind of changing a project's purpose within the queue, which leads to lots of mod-app applications that you have to process. Are you kind of trying to disincentivize that to say, look, no, you've got what you've got in the queue. If you want something radically different, you're going to have to reapply and take your chances. And actually just saying that to people might make them think and stop them reapplying.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, part of the Connection Action Plan actions were kind of disincentivizing projects from applying, and also raising the barriers to entry. So we've raised the barriers to entry with LOA version 1, and now we're looking at trying to do, I guess, make sure that projects that are in the queue, so if they've met Gate 2, then making sure that they are going to progress. The whole aim of all of the work that we're doing is to try and make sure that we progress projects that can viably progress and help meet net zero targets.
Yeah. I think, and definitely at Road Night Taylor, we really support that, and I think we also see the kind of pragmatic challenges, and there's loads of things we think, well, we should change this now, but actually it's kind of a little bit of a balance as to how many changes we try and put in place all at once. And I think in some ways the big connections reforms mods have the opportunity to mop up a lot of these kind of outstanding details. I suppose with that in mind, one of the challenges in some ways with there being so much going on is keeping people abreast. And I've learned quite a lot of things from this conversation. So I think maybe invite Laura Henry over for a cup of tea. She doesn't drink tea, but is my lesson learned. But how are you finding the kind of challenge of engaging with stakeholders and getting the information out there?
It's because of the pace that we're running at with all of these initiatives. It's always a challenge to make sure that everybody's getting the messages at the same time, etc. But we do a lot of stakeholder engagement. I mean, stakeholder engagement forms a key part of all of the tactical initiatives. So whether it's a work group where we're talking to them on a regular basis, or, we do a lot of engagement externally. So we have our Connections Forum, which is every month. So we've recently rebranded that.
That's what used to be the Agoras.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So it used to be the Agoras. We've rebranded it as the Connections Forum. And it covers the whole of Connections. So you get to hear about Connections operations, Connections change delivery, and Connections strategy as well, all in one place. And the next one is on Monday, actually. So you'll hear from me again at that. And then we do a lot of webinars, specifically on certain topics. So when we're implementing some of the large-scale changes, so for example, queue management, letter of authority, we appreciate that it's a massive change externally. And so, we want to make sure that we engage with our customers, and customers have the opportunity to ask us questions. So we do a lot of tailored webinars and Q&A sessions to make sure that customers can engage with us. We also write a lot of guidance documents as well. So all of these materials that we put on our website are to help guide customers through these big changes and help them to understand what the change is. And then we also have a monthly newsletter where we cover new things that we're launching, but also reminders of existing tactical initiatives that are happening. And then we've just had our customer seminar in Glasgow a couple of weeks ago. So it's great. We got to speak to nearly 200 of our customers about all the things that we're doing to improve connections in the short term, as well as the longer term reform as well. So we make.
I was there. You were great. There were no heckles.
That's right. Thank you. But yeah, so stakeholder engagement is really, really important to us. We also work really closely with key stakeholders, so Ofgem, DESNES, the TOs and the DNOs, on all of the work that we do. It's we work really closely with them on every single initiative. And then because of the scale of the pace that we're working at, it's really important that we have the right governance in place as well. So that's where CPAG and the Connections Delivery Board has been absolutely brilliant in helping to give us those forums to talk to industry about the initiatives, get feedback, and then help use that to tailor how they go.
Being nice, because I sit on CPAG. But no, I think it's and we really, I definitely have really been impressed and kind of welcome the level of engagement, especially with DNOs, for example. I think that's perhaps been something where that transmission distribution boundary has always been fraught with both kind of technical and commercial complexity, and it's really good to see more engagement happening. I think there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that doesn't necessarily get sort of shouted about in the kind of public forums, but I think it's been really heartening to see lots of DNOs, for example, have their own webinars, which they've then asked you guys to come along to, and potentially the relevant TO, and kind of present a sort of like united front so that people can actually ask the questions to the right entity. You don't get a sort of he said, she said kind of element of who's causing a delay or a problem. So that's been really good to see.
Yeah, no, it's been great. Yeah, like you say, we get invited on a lot of DNO webinars, and it's great to have that platform and engage with the DNO customers directly as well. So yeah, no, we'll continue to do that on a regular basis as well.
Awesome. I suspect you've never had to speak at so many events in any other job role.
No, but I do really enjoy it. I do like that part of the role. It's good.
It's really good. It's nice to see. It's nice to see a very strong female engineering figure standing up, and in the energy industry. So you're a very good role model.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
And do you think? Your job role has been crazy over the last sort of 12 months. That with the level of pace of change, are we kind of nearing the end now of the? I'm going to call it the snake, which is your PowerPoint slide, which has all of those tactical initiatives on. Are we kind of nearing the end of that now? And now is it over to connections reform to deal with the next step of changes that need to be implemented?
So, like you say, the tactical initiatives have been going on for nearly 2 years now, but a lot of them are going to continue past reform. So on the snake, there's a couple of points that kind of go past connections reform. So there's the demand securities code mod, so CMP 417. So that is expected to have a decision in early 2025. And then there's other half of the queue management code mod. So it's known externally as zombie projects, but we internally tend to call it kind of pre-November 2025 projects. But they're the projects that got ring-fenced as part of the queue management code mod because they were due to connect in the near term. But we have the commitment to continue to monitor them up until the 27th of November 25. So that project will continue. But also there'll be more tactical initiatives that will be needed. So connections reform is, a brilliant project that's going to create a lot of change to connections, but there's also areas of the codes that connections reform doesn't touch. And there's areas that we will still need to look at improving through the tactical initiatives way past reform. So I see the tactical initiatives and the reform working hand in hand with each other.
So I guess now you've got that team set up, you're going to retain that capability to be a bit more sort of surgical and go in and change very specific things that need it.
Yeah, no, definitely. We'll still be raising code mods for areas that are defected in the CUSC or any of the codes. We'll be writing policies where there's areas that aren't clear. And my team are also supporting in the implementation of reform as well. So there's a lot of work to be done there before reform comes into effect.
I'm just making a mental list of all the things I can send you in an email, Nora, suggestions for next tactical change. Maybe securities and liabilities will make it onto that list.
It's definitely, securities has definitely been around there for a long time. So we've got the demand securities, but that's only a very small part. So
and that's just bringing demand customers onto the kind of the CUSC section 15, which generating users will be used to, the kind of attributable and wider liabilities concept. But I suppose there'd be a lot of people who'd say, well, actually, that CUSC section 15 methodology is already a bit broken.
Yeah. No, it's very much on our radar. We've been made aware of lots of different defects with section 15. So yeah, it's definitely on our radar of things to look at once the connections reform code mods have gone through.
Awesome. Brilliant to hear. So which of the tactical initiatives, if you had to pick one, do you think has been most impactful?
Okay, so as you know, we've had a number of tactical initiatives, all of which cumulatively will have a big impact on connection dates and on the connections queue. But in terms of ones that have had the biggest impact, I might just, again, like I did with the other question, just go in reverse. So I guess if we start, I'll just cover a few of them. We start with TEC Amnesty. So that released 4.1 gigawatts of capacity. Like I said, that was the first of the 5-point plan actions to close. And it really started us off on starting to remove and reduce the size of the queue. I think that the code mods that we've had approved recently, so queue management and letter of authority, they will have big impacts. It's just we're still in the transitions phase at the minute of settling those code mods in. So queue management, we're nearly at the end of the notice period. We are putting queue management milestones into agreements, but we still have got quite a long way to go in terms of getting them into all the agreements. But once it is in, I think that will have a really big impact. Letter of authority, we're already starting to see application numbers reduce and also applications be rejected because they haven't met letter of authority requirements. So again, I think in terms of raising barriers to entry, that is having a big impact. It only came into effect on the 28th of March. We're only, 6 weeks into it. So I think as we see the letter of authority be in for longer, we'll see even more results from that one. And then the biggest areas where we've seen change in terms of size of the queue. So it's the projects that my colleague Will Cook-Wilson leads on. So it's non-firm energy storage acceleration. So we've seen 10 gigawatts from phase 1 accelerated, and there's another 10 gigawatts estimated from phase 2. So that's brilliant. We've got 20 gigawatts from that project. So really great numbers there.
And then could be more. Is phase 2 the end?
So no, it will continue. And there's also the work with the Scottish TOs as well, because 20 gigawatts is in England, Wales. And also we will look to see if we can expand the project further as well. And then the one that's had the biggest impact is the technical limits project, which I know
a favourite.
A lot of your customers, listeners will be interested in that one. So that one is really bridging across the transmission and distribution sides of the network. And when the project is completed, it will actually have resulted in 50 gigawatts of accelerated connections, which is an absolutely brilliant figure. So yeah, by far, that one is the one that's had the biggest impact in terms of gigawatts. But like I say, cumulatively, they will all have lots of impact between them.
We just need to make sure that those 50 gigawatts can accept their offers because they've got enough detail on the commercial constraints and that they have not got really exorbitantly high SGT charging. So those are our other two bugbears. But I think as long as we can fix those, that 50 gigawatts is a very impressive number. Well, thank you very much, Laura, and we'll leave it there.
Thank you for taking your precious time to listen to this episode. Now, not everyone is ready to have a connectologist in their life. For others, it's just too expensive. And as our team is so small, we do have to be very selective in what work we take on. And that's why we put so much effort into these shows. We want our society to have the equitable energy system it needs in order to decarbonise and to thrive. So we want to help to topple as many connections barriers as we possibly can, in spite of our size. So please do feel free to ping a link to this episode to anyone you know who might be interested, because it would mean so much to everyone here.